We've just done the first of St. Thomas Aquinas' 5 proofs for the existence of God, called the unmoved mover, or the proof from motion. Now the other one is like it, but remember, none of these two is exactly the same, and each of them stands independently as a proof of the existence of God. Okay, so, and if you take them all together, you get a more rounded picture of what God actually is than but one will do, but all 5 of them put together give you a kind of nicer picture. So the proof from causality. The starting point of the second proof for the existence of God is things in the world which are evidently products of an efficient cause. The statue in the park, the automobile on the street, the house on the hill, the book on the shelf did not just happen, they were made. Not only must we say that this statue was made, but we must also say that it did not make itself. A thing must exist before it can act. It must itself be before it can produce. It is absurd to hold that an effect such as a statue or a house existed before its cause, or that an effect is its own cause. Fast forward from Thomas Aquinas to our century. What do they see? They're trying to replace God with the Big Bang, So the Big Bang just happened. Oh yeah. There wasn't. I don't even think there was the Big Bang. But if there was a Big Bang, the people who are proponents of it say that it just happened. It had no cause. And people like that moron Stephen Hawking and people like that spent their careers trying to show how everything just happened with nothing causing it. And I could have saved him a lot of time. So, when we are presented with an effect, we must look for its cause in a being distinct from that effect. In point of time, this cause is the last one which operated. If this last cause was itself the effect of a previous cause, we shall call that previous existing cause the intermediary cause. In a cause and effect series, there might be a few or there might be many intermediary causes. But there cannot be so many that the series goes back endlessly. So however far you go back in intermediary causes, it can't be infinite. You have to get to some point where you reach something that was not an intermediary cause, which was the cause of all these other things. That was the origin of them. So it can't go back. The impossibility of this lies in the fact that you cannot have the end of a series without also having a beginning. If one holds that this series of causes and effects goes back endlessly, then he is forced to hold that it never started. You get that now? So if you're going to say that these causes go back infinitely, then you have to say that they actually never started. And that doesn't make any sense because we can see that they started. And it is as foolish to hold this as it is to hold that there can be a stick with only one end. Since reason demands that the series of subordinate causes had a beginning, it also demands that this series must have been started by a being, capital B, who, capital W, owes his power to bring about such an effect to no one. He always possessed this power. He is the first efficient cause, and this is but another name for God. Remember, so I just told you at the end of these series that we're going to get to, we call that God. But they have other names, the first efficient cause. So at the end of all these causes, there has to be a point where the whole series runs out and you come across a being who imparted the being to these things, and who had being himself, who possessed the ability to cause things in himself as part of his own nature. And that being is God. By the way, just while we're on the term of things like infinite and things like that. So I remember, you could still watch the old programs on Netflix or YouTube or something with Carl Sagan, and this kind of thing. And they're talking about, well, is the universe infinite? And I don't have to be a genius to say, no, it's not infinite. I mean, it might go on, it might not have a limit, it might not have an end, but that's not what infinite is. If something is, however vast the expanse of the universe is made up of things which are finite. So, when they talk about the vast universe, they're talking about galaxies and clouds of dust and, stars, planets, and whatever. All those things are finite. So a bunch of finite things cannot add up to an infinite universe. The universe might not have a physical limitation and might continue on forever, but that's not what infinite actually is. It isn't, in fact, finite because it's made of finite things. Okay, the proof from contingency. The fact of experience, which is the beginning of the third proof for the existence of God, is the observation that there are in the world things which exist, but which do not have to exist. In fact, most of what we see, if not everything we actually see, are things which do not have to exist. They exist because God wills that they exist. But he could also will that they do not exist. So they're not things which have to exist. I do not have to exist. This building doesn't have to exist. Garden Grove doesn't have to exist. It does exist, but it doesn't have to. It could just as well not exist. They are generated and they will corrupt. They are contingent on other things for their existence. Plants and animals clearly belong to this class of things. There was a time when they did not exist. They exist now. There will come a time when they will pass out of existence. If the existence of a thing is not necessary, and it is not if it is contingent. Contingent means it relies on something else, basically. Then there was a time when it did not exist. Since it clearly cannot attribute its present existence to itself, it must look to a being outside itself as the source of its own existence. The fact that there are things in the world which are dependent upon others point to the existence of a being who is not dependent on any other for existence, and this being is God. If one denies the existence of a necessary being, so what we see most all the time are what we would call unnecessary beings. It doesn't mean we don't need each other for something like that. It just means these things we see do not have to exist. Then there must be then a necessary self-subsistent being at the end of that series. The being that is that is not dependent on any other for his existence. He is existence. So God does not simply, and this is true with most of the things we happen to say about God. God does not simply exist. God is existence. God is himself in all perfection the quality of existence. And in fact, most of the things we talk about as being qualities of God are actually God. God isn't perfect. he is perfection. He is infinite perfection. And he is the source of all perfection for anything else that has perfections with small p's in it. He isn't just truth. I mean, he isn't just true, he is truth. And he is the source of anything that's true. Anything that's true, whether it be a statement of fact or a mathematical formula or a theory in physics that's true, ultimately has its source in God, because anything that's true has to come from truth, whose sole source is God himself. So remember then, when we're talking about the qualities of God, which we will eventually talk about, that God doesn't so much have these qualities as he is these qualities. If one denies the existence of a necessary being, it is impossible for him to account for the presence of contingent beings in the world. The two are distinct and cannot be confused. Several reasons make it impossible to deny this distinction. A great number of dependent beings can never add up to an independent being, for the whole cannot be greater than the sum of its parts, and many negatives can never add up to a positive. This necessary being is not the material substance of the world which is the substratum of all material contingent beings, such as plants and animals. The reason for this is that the material world is of a composite character composed of parts, and is itself dependent on a higher compounding agent for its composition. A necessary being is a perfect being. It is impossible for a perfect being to undergo change. The myriads of changes observable in the world attest to its lack of absolute perfection. So, we use the term for most things, most of the time, oh, it's perfect, oh, it's perfect, oh, it's perfect. Remember, though, that only God is actually perfect. The word perfect can only, strictly speaking, properly be applied to God. Now, we use it, hyperbolically, they say. It's like, well, how did you like the flower arrangement at your wedding? Oh, it was perfect, okay? And we all know what it means. It means it was like just the best thing for the wedding, and it couldn't have been any better thing. But when we're talking about perfections of God, we're talking about like a different kind of perfect, meaning a lot of things. One being the absence of composite parts, and the other being infinite qualities, infinite perfections. The conclusion of this third part is this. If one desires the existence of a necessary being, he must deny the existence of all contingent beings, for they depend on the former. Experience easily proves this to be an absurdity. If, on the one hand, he admits the existence of contingent beings, he must admit the existence of a necessarily existent being, upon whom all depend, and who is called God. So, if you're going to admit that there are things which exist and are dependent on something else for their existence, then you have to admit the existence of God, who imparted existence to this line and myriad of contingent beings that are dependent on something else for their existence. There has to be one that's not dependent on anything for its existence, that gave existence to these contingent beings, and that's God. We do well here to notice the difference between the proof for the existence of God from causality and from contingency. They are not the same. In the proof from causality, we look at things as they are products of an efficient cause, and eventually conclude to the existence of a first efficient cause. In the proof from contingency, we look at things under the aspect of objects which do not have to exist, and eventually conclude to the existence of being who must necessarily exist. The two proofs are quite different from each other, although they sound to us right now, until you reread them about 50 times, Not the same.
Geometry.
I know, yeah. So degrees of perfection. In the world about us, we see things that possess perfection, small p. We see things that are good, true, beautiful, living, and the like. These perfections are in themselves limitless or inexhaustible, but the things that possess them have them in varying degrees and in a limited fashion. So once again, getting back to, we're saying that something has qualities, okay? It has various qualities, and the qualities in themselves are perfections with a small p. But a being possesses them in limited, finite amounts. So while you can possess a quality that is in itself a reflection of a perfection, you don't have all of that perfection, you just show some of it in whatever degree you have. Like let's take intelligence. We have intelligence, strictly speaking, is a perfection. But we possess intelligence in a limited amount. You know, they have the IQ scale, and they go, well, this guy was a 200, you know, the highest ever recorded, and then this other guy's like a 4, you know, and we compare them, and like a 4 is not as much as a 200, but they both, even the guy with an IQ of 2, possesses some limited amount of the perfection of intelligence, but not the fullness. And in fact, the guy who's 200 isn't that much ahead of him when it comes to infinite perfection of intelligence, you see. So we shouldn't get puffed up if you're like 150 or something, you know, because don't go up against God in an intelligence test. We look at the life that this particular thing, that, for example, a tree, possesses and it is quite evident that it does not possess the perfection of life in its entirety, for there are many other things in existence. In fact, the tree possesses life in an extremely limited degree. Now, if we combined all the living things in the world, this aggregate would still not exhaust this perfection. If you took everything that was alive in the world, put them together, it would not exhaust the perfection of life, of livingness, or however you want to put it, of being alive. No matter how great or how many living things of limited perfection could be combined, they still would not constitute all possible life, for the term life of itself does not admit of any limitation. Since this tree has a limited degree of the perfection of life, it clearly cannot be the source of all this perfection, nor can it even be the source of its own perfection. In fact, it makes no difference how great a limited thing is. It cannot possess an exhaustless perfection, for the finite cannot contain the infinite. It follows then that a limited perfection is a received perfection. And if there are things in existence possessing limited or received perfections, as indeed there must exist a being who possesses perfection in an inexhaustible and infinite degree, and this being we call God. So that one's not too hard to understand, right? Okay, Becca, what was that one all about?
I'm not perfect, and neither are you.
But God is the end. So, we look at all the qualities that things possess. They all possess whatever qualities, however good they are, to a limited degree. There must be one who has them completely, entirely, and in an infinite degree in order to give them the perfections and the qualities that they have. Okay? And that's what we call God. He's the one at the end of the line with infinite perfection that that gives existence and perfection or qualities to other being. Limited perfection. Proof from design. The starting point for the fifth proof for the existence of God is the observation that there are about us things which serve a purpose. The cogency of this argument, no, if you live in Sacramento, that's not necessarily true, but in general, the cogency of this argument is not weakened because of the fact that the purposefulness of many objects cannot readily be named. You often wonder, so before the fall of Adam, what were mosquitoes like? I mean, they obviously weren't biting people and bugging us and giving us malaria and stuff like that before Adam fell. And what now, so what about flies and all that kind of stuff? So sometimes we can't readily tell what something is for. We can't tell its purposefulness, as they say here. But that doesn't change the fact that it serves some kind of purpose. The purpose might be known to God himself. I remember as a kid going through a museum in Edinburgh in Scotland, and there were all these Paleolithic things. And my friend and I decided they were all paperweights. So, it said, we don't know what this was used for. We go, it's another paperweight. This is a ball with some kind of carvings on it or something like that. They were all paperweights. So sometimes the purpose of something is known to God alone, but we know that it has a purpose. And if you jump ahead in, just advance, I guess, a little bit to the teachings of the faith, really the ultimate purpose of everything, whether we know what it is for, is directly or not used for, is the glory, to give glory to God. God created everything and keeps everything in existence primarily for his glory. That is the reason for existence. Some people, these like Baptists and whatnot, will say, he created this sunset just for me and all this kind of... No, he created for him. I know. He created for him so that you seeing it would give him glory by the beauty of what you're seeing. And that is the reason really for all of creation, is for the glory of God. So when we say we might not know the purpose, we kind of know the ultimate purpose of whatever that is. The ultimate purpose is for the glory of God. If there were but one instance of usefulness in the whole universe, this proof would still be valid. So even if the whole universe, we only found one thing that was useful, then the proof we're doing is still valid. There are many things in the world which were made for a definite reason. Man has eyes to see and ears to hear. Birds have wings to fly, fish have gills to breathe, an eagle has talons to grasp. Many other instances of purposefulness could be given. In each object, the parts were fitted together in such a manner that a definite goal might be attained. A different arrangement of the same parts would not bring about the same result. The parts of the eye are so arranged that sight might be had. Wings are so made up that they may sustain the bird in flight. A root is designed to play an integral part in the life of the plant. The designing of a useful thing involves several factors. It takes intelligence to arrange the parts of an object so that it will serve a purpose. The designer must first conceive his goal. Then he must know how the parts are to be arranged so that his goal will be reached. These two steps must be thought out abstractly before the work of fitting the parts together can begin. But abstract thought requires an immaterial thinking power called intelligence. Material things, because they are material, are not capable of abstract thought. Now, once again, he's not talking about human beings, for example. Yes, we're material. but that he's not talking about human beings using the qualities that come from their soul. He's talking about just the matter part. So when he talks about a material being, that is the part made from matter. Because ultimately, as we'll see, things like thought, emotion, those other things, the will itself, reside in the soul, not in the brain or the body or anything like that. They're not a material function. The brain is an antenna. It's not the source of your thinking. Your thinking and your will, your moral judgments are characteristics of your soul. They're functions of your soul. So when he's talking about here now, material beings. The existence of a series of beings in which each intelligence received its intelligence from another intelligent being does not account for the source of all intelligence. One must ultimately admit the existence of a being whose intelligence was not acquired from another. This being is called the unacquired intelligence. This is but another name for God, therefore God exists. So we call God the unacquired intelligence, the source of intelligence, the one who possessed intelligence in its infinite amount, in order to be able to impart it. And we call that being at the end of the line, that is God, the one who possessed infinite intelligence and who imparted it to the first intelligent thing is what we call God. Now, on the nature of God. Even though we cannot comprehend the nature of God, we can learn something about it by the use of reason. Okay, now, this is up against the ones who want to say, well, if we can't really know everything about it, then we can't know anything about it, which is not true. There are things in religion we call them mysteries. Now, not in the sense of a mystery like the Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew or one of those kinds of things, or mysteries like a whodunit. These mysteries are things which are so vast that we cannot totally comprehend them. And we have to be happy with the fact we can't totally comprehend them. But they're not things about which we can know nothing. They are things which ultimately are beyond us to completely wrap our minds around 100%. But they are things about which we can know something. And, but the mystery, God is ultimately a mystery. But we can say an awful lot of things that we know about what God is and who he is and what he did and what he said and this kind of thing. But we can't totally understand God because we're not God. Remember, we possess in a limited degree the intelligence that he possesses, that he is in infinite degree. So we can only use the intelligence we have imparted to us in limited degree to try to grasp something of the limitless perfection of intelligence that God is. And like I say, you have to be happy with that. The only one that wasn't really happy with that at first was Satan, Lucifer at the time. And he just couldn't stand that. He couldn't stand that he couldn't create, but his boss could. And so he wasn't going to listen to him. And I think, probably some people follow suit in a way. So, which would I say? Science? Science tells us that because of atmospheric conditions, there was a time when no man existed on Earth. At that time, the nature of man existed, but existed only in the realm of possibility. From this, it is easy to see that there is nothing about human nature or any other created nature which demands that it must have actual existence. Science is attempting to determine when man first appeared on the face of the earth. It is trying to fix the time when this human nature, which had previously existed only in the realm of possibility, was combined with the perfection called actual existence. Looking at a creature from this point of view is important. It shows that man is a combination of essence and existence. Essence remained only possible until it was lifted into the status of an actual being by the advent of existence. Every creature is a compound of these two elements. So, in other words, there are the other two words we use, which are potential existence and actual or kinetic existence, okay? Say actual existence. Potential is anything in the realm of possibility. And sometimes talking about potentially existent things gets a little confusing. And you just have to adjust your brain to the language, I think. Like, we'll talk about something that, okay, I could say, I'm Pope, potentially. See, I'm not actually Pope, but I am potentially the Pope. And it sounds like, I think he's lost it. I wonder what encyclical he's going to come out with tomorrow. No, but it's something that is within, that could be, but not necessarily is said to exist in the realm of the potential. Now, it becomes actual when the potential takes on being. So, were I elected Pope and had my glorious one-day pontificate before they shot me, and did all the things that I've been meaning to do, were I elected Pope, then I would actually be Pope then, in actuality, which I was only Pope in potentia before. So that's the part that you have to adjust your brain around, is when we're talking about things actually being, but being potential, as opposed to being in actuality, having received existence and going from the realm of the potential to the actual.
Would this be like someone planning on having children and wanting to have children, but they're not in existence yet?
Right, yeah, so potentially you have children. But you don't actually have children, you see, if you're in that state. So you want to, you don't even have to want to potentially have children. I mean, I don't want any kids, and I potentially have children in that sense. You know what I mean? Okay. It's something that's in the realm of the potential possibility. I don't have to want the kids in order to potentially have children or be a father, kind of thing. You know, I don't have to want it. Huh? What? Every compound presupposes the preexistence of a compounding agent that brought it about. In the proofs for the existence of God, we saw that nothing which is merely possible can make itself actual by annexing to itself the nature, the perfection of existence. This combination can only be effected by an external agent. All of the 5 proofs for God's existence brought out the point that there was absolutely nothing prior to God in existence. For this reason, we must say that there was no power that could make in God a combination of any kind. Okay, let me start that over. I think I need some water. Okay. All of the 5 proofs for God's existence brought out the point that there was absolutely nothing prior to God in existence. In other words, in all of these, the unmoved mover, the existence of being, he was at the end of the line, and he was the one who imparted the motion, who imparted perfections, who imparted existence. But he himself was existence itself. So you can't make a combination in him of any kind. He's not made up of stuff. He just is. All of the power, yes, for this reason we say that there is no power that can make God a combination of any kind. God has an essence and an existence, but they are not found in combination. They are one and the same. It is his nature to exist. So remember, another way I said to put that is, he is existence. He doesn't exist as we do in that sense, with a limited kind of existence. He is existence. He is infinite existence. And so he imparts existence to other things like ourselves which exist. But he has it infinitely and is the only one who necessarily exists and possesses existence in its infinity. It is his nature to exist. Man is a nature with existence, but God's essence or nature is existence. Thus, the supreme truth of philosophy, or the fundamental truth of judgment, is that in God alone, essence and existence are identified. It means identified doesn't mean, oh, I know who he is. It means they are one. They're identical with them. So, in God alone, the essence and existence are one, really, is what that quote means. Several conclusions flow from the fact that God's essence is identical with his existence. One, he is a spirit. God must be a spirit because he is devoid of all composition. So, if he were like us, I mean, I don't mean his incarnation. I mean God, the one God who is pure spirit. If he were not pure spirit and like us and had an arm or a leg and like we do and things like that, well, that he would be made up of parts then. And infinite existence cannot be made up of parts. It's not consistent with infinite existence. It means that he would be compartmentalized into different pieces that are more characteristic of contingent beings like ourselves, of course. So he is pure spirit. He is not material, for material objects have measurable parts, and these presuppose composition. The human soul is a spirit because it too does not have measurable parts, but it is still a composite of essence and existence. Since God has neither parts nor composition, he is a perfectly simple spirit. Once again, simple not meaning simplistic, like Simple Simon, kind of thing. Simple meaning has no parts, no composition, just absolutely pure spirit. He is infinitely perfect. In the fourth proof for the existence of God, it was pointed out that being is a perfection which of itself does not imply limitation of any kind. Things in the world about us have limited being or perfection because they have limited existence. Limitation must be imposed by a limiting cause. Since there is no being prior to God that could in any way limit him, we must conclude that he is an infinite being. To be infinite being is to be infinite perfection, for perfection cannot exist without being. We're right at 9 now. Yeah, we'll go on with this next week. Any questions? Any deep philosophical insights, anybody? Well, that would be one sense of it. But infinite with regard to God means in perfection in no limitable amount. See, infinite can, in the sense we use it in the universe, could mean there's no end to the universe. But because the universe is made up of things which are finite, which were created, then the universe isn't truly infinite. Only God who is not created is infinite. Because he had no beginning, he has no end.
Yeah, because he asked me like this. Our soul is never die. It's
Right, but it's not infinite. It's immortal. Immortal. Yes. Okay, now everybody, very, very important. Very, very important. Wesley Webbit. Next Wednesday, no class. 'Tis the night before Thanksgiving, and all through the house, people are trying to figure out what to do with that huge turkey. So, and I will be visiting Northern California to see my family. So we shall reconvene the following Wednesday, okay? Okay. In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Our Lady, seat of wisdom. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.